Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, the challenge of rubbing the sleep out of your eyes after an open week as Tech returns to the field. And what powerful figures has Chris Level ticked off before?
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. And a few different things to dive into here today, but wanted to begin with Red Raider football coming out of their open week hibernation of sorts. And I wanted to ask you about maybe some of the inherent difficulty that comes with trying to get the motor restarted. Now, on both sides of the field, you got two teams that are dealing with this, so I don't know if it'll be a particular advantage or disadvantage to either one. But first, let's take a listen to Texas Tech running backs coach, special teams coordinator Kenny Perry talking about not only one open week, but another we'll have to deal with as well coming up.
A little different. Obviously, the best part about it is you get to get healthy. The worst part about it is I like playing games, so this is part of it. I'm sure there's a rhyme or reason. No one asked me if we needed 2 bye weeks, so after that, I don't care. They can do it. I'm just going to follow the rules and do what I'm supposed to do. It's good to get some guys healthy, get on the road to recruit a little bit different than last year, when coach was letting us know we're all 3 and 5 coaches. This year we got to go out as 5 and 1 coaches, but it is what it is. You just got to want to win, and we got a great opportunity ahead of us, and like we've been saying, no regrets. Let's go on. Let's move on and get to next week.
Chris, like I said, Baylor was not in action last time around either, so both teams will be dealing with this, but I've kind of talked about all the great things that come with an open week as far as trying to get healthier and things like that. But there's got to inherently be some challenge also to that for a team. Like, I don't know, waking up from a nap and you're still a little groggy or something, which is obviously not the way you want to be. But over the years, I imagine you've seen various approaches to kind of shaking off the sleep or rubbing the sleep out of their eyes when a team leaves an open week. And this is a team that was feeling good. You're stacking up some wins, so sometimes that's not exactly when you do want a break. So I'm wondering what variety of the Red Raiders will find when we get back to it Saturday afternoon after some time off.
Well, and what's interesting is that the first 2 seasons under Coach McGuire, you had road losses, and then you would come home and bounce back after the bye week. You're 2-0 under Joey after a bye week, and both of those previous ones were road losses, and it equaled coming back home and wins. I think the first year, go to Stillwater, lose a game, come home and just hammer West Virginia. Last year, I think I'm trying to remember who you lost to on the road, but you came home and beat TCU, I believe it was. I can't remember last year who because you had a kind of a weird deal. You played TCU on a Thursday night. That was your game that weekend, but you were off the previous weekend. So I just can't.
Was it BYU? I think it was BYU.
That's exactly. It was in Provo. Good call. Yep, that's exactly right. After a turnover fest and the cougar tail donuts and ice cream getting handed out and a freshman quarterback, it was quite the memorable night and one to certainly forget. But it's really just all about keeping your edge. And I think the interesting thing is the dynamic into this game is that because if some of the other things that Kenny said is, look, Baylor's going to come into this deal maybe angry or really desperate, trying to get it fixed, and maybe has an edge to them. And Kenny's response was like, "Man, that's their problem. Like we're trying to win one game a week. I'm not worried about all the issues they may be dealing with. I'm worried about 60 minutes on a Saturday afternoon against these guys and we've got our own issues that we're dealing with, like, taking care of the football and blocking on the backside, and my special team stuff, all those things. But it's really about keeping an edge, because I would guess, with both teams being away for a week, you're right, there's not like any sort of advantage on timing or rhythm and things that's what always fascinates me about the bowl game. When you play and then you're off for 4 to 5 weeks, that's not normal at all. And I think Joey and his staff in the 2 previous years have managed that extremely well, because they're 2-0 in bowl games, with extra time to prepare. So, but it's, you don't ultimately know what you're getting into until, midway through the first quarter, and you're like, ooh, Baylor came to play, or man, they drank that jug of quit, and it could be a fun day. But then again, you've got your own issues as well that you're kind of wondering about, and all that. And the biggest thing, when you have extra time, you can experiment with hey, let's add this into this, let's show them this, and you've got a lot of time to work on it. So that's really what a bye week thing is. That's when your time to kind of tweak your scheme or show something different on either side of the ball that maybe has not been seen before. So that's also something to note as well for both sides of this deal.
That's interesting that you bring that up, something that we haven't seen before. I was kind of wondering about, getting back into the flow, into some rhythm, and, maybe there are some things that click a little quicker, or some things that take a little longer to get back into. And it kind of just had me wondering about Tech's bread and butter. I mean, we've done kind of some midpoint assessments, so to speak, now with 6 regular season games having been played. And I wonder if there's any other answer to what does Tech do best right now? What is their bread and butter? What can they lean on? Then give the football to number 28. Is there anything else that would even qualify for that? Because there have been some things that have been pretty good on both sides of the ball, but there's been kind of like, an ebb and flow. It's like, well, this week wasn't as good here or there. I mean, as an example, if we're talking about the Texas Tech passing game and you were feeling good about some stuff, well, last time around, it turned into the Caleb Douglas show, and it wasn't so much the Josh Kelly show. When previously I'd have said, no, it's number 3 that I'm really feeling good about showing back up. So do you think it really is the Texas Tech ground game and all things centered around Taj Brooks, that right now that is what we can count on being able to lean on?
If somebody were to say, hey, Chris, can you sum up? I haven't been able to watch any games this year, but can you sum up what Texas Tech is, or what kind of what's it look like to this point? Man, I've been out of the country, hadn't been able to see anything, and I would probably say, man, I think they're really balanced on offense. I think that's your identity is the balance, because it's not slanted one over the other. And I think Barron is throwing it for about 200 to 250 a game. I think he's been really good at taking care of it. They've been explosive, but it's all plays off of each other. It's that the run game sets up, and vice versa. I think, and then I would say, on the flip side is like, well, I think you're very opportunistic on defense right now with being able to take the ball away. You're statistically, you're not very good, but if you keep mixing in turnovers and some of those things, that's what has changed some of these games. And I firmly believe that. And you've been really, really good on special teams. I don't want to gloss over that. And I would say, period, the end. That's how I would sum up where you are to this point of the season. But I think I think your bread and butter on offense, sure, it's some of that running game, but so is the RPO part of it too. Yeah. And getting the ball out, and like, it's the balance. It's the yin and the yang, man. It goes together really, really nice. And I mean, that's to me, I don't know if you can major in one or the other. I don't know if you're good enough there, but when it's balanced, boy, it's pretty hard to defend.
Man, and you bring up something that's probably been under discussed at this point in the season, and that is the special teams impact, particularly those kickers. I mean, we hadn't even had to deal with the missed field goal up to this point in time, and I don't believe in jinxes, so I'm not afraid to say that. Are you knocking on your head?
It's the only wood I can find. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Coach McGuire brought it up. He wasn't afraid to say it either, but I guess, I don't know, maybe we're already taking that kind of for granted, because we talked about it the first few early weeks, and hey, you got some clutch kicking here, and man, I can't believe you're still in this rotation and they're being successful. But as we're sitting here in the middle of October, I would just say again, man, I can't believe we're in this rotation and they're still being successful. It's a
And
wild thing to observe.
Kenny was asked about that yesterday, and he did talk about because that's one of the things that kind of slipped under the radar there at the end of that Arizona game.
First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Never sweat buying tickets to your favorite event again with Gametime. It's always a breeze using the Gametime app where you're going to find the best last-minute deals, and I love being able to scout out a view from any seat before pulling the trigger. Of course, you're always doing it at the lowest price guaranteed. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins, which means you can finish off that final brat, that final beer at your own pace at the tailgate, because Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. Gametime gives you the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets, but not just fast, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Gametime app and create an account and use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed.
Kenny was asked about that yesterday, and he did talk about because that's one of the things that kind of slipped under the radar there at the end of that Arizona game, is he kind of went out of rotation a bit for the first time, something that we noted on the broadcast as it was happening. I'm like, hey, man, it's Reese's turn, but Gino's going back out there because this is go ahead type kick.
Yeah.
This is a big boy kick. And he said it yesterday. Hey, I'm going to stick with the rotation. Both guys have, but that's just what I felt at the time. They could both handle it. We'll get back to doing what we were doing. So, but Kenny broke the tie right then. But you think about Dre when he's allowed to return it, and every return hasn't been great, but I would say he's a plus at that spot, and that unit is a plus. I mean, he's been Big 12 Special Teams Player of the Week, for goodness sakes, already this year. Your specialist. I mean, that sneaky 2-point conversion, in the last time that you played, it kind of altered the way the game would be played a little bit with the way that the score was, and that was just Arizona looked like totally unprepared for it, and your guys were extremely well coached to look for certain things. When they saw it, it was like boom. I mean, you've had another 2-point conversion, traditional way earlier in the year. I mean, so I just think, you're, with what we've seen of Burgess, the crocodile punter. That's been, you may have not won the special teams aspect in every single game, but you haven't lost it. And if anything, it's been a plus, a lot more than it's been, even or a negative for you. And I think that should be, pointed out.
Yeah, no doubt. They've been doing a great job there pretty much all the way around. And typically you'll find with a good football team, the special teams is a plus and not a minus. I mean, all those hidden yards and anything else you want to use to describe special teams impact. And obviously, I mean, I'm just having visions of Bill Snyder dancing in my head right now because Kansas State is the extreme example of plus special teams impact.
Well, and Baylor has the number one punt returner and kick returner, two different guys in the conference right now statistically. So this will be a big challenge, because that's the one thing that Baylor has been pretty consistent with and pretty good with. So we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, it's fun to have that part of your team help you and not hurt you, because so many times it's about just don't screw it up, and too many teams do, or give up this return or whatever it may be, and it's been pretty good to this point. Yes,
no doubt. All right, we're going to switch gears and make a hard left here, because I want to get to a question from a Matador mobster. This is from our guy Justin, who has been asking about something relevant to some news kind of outside of our sphere, but inside of our sphere. Have you noticed one of the league's worst general managers getting some attention this week? It's Jerry Jones time. Making some waves with the way that he was discussing some things on Dallas radio there. And that's why I have on the screen fireable questions, ? Because Justin was actually asking from your perspective, Chris, all the years that you've spent in conversation with head coaches or near and dear to athletics directors, those in positions of leadership, have you ever experienced anything like what we heard in Cowboys land this week with some radio hosts being threatened? I can find other guys to ask me these questions. This is not your job to ask me these questions or to be so critical, yada, yada, yada. I'm sure most out there, I'm going to assume, know what I'm talking about, and I've heard these comments from Jerry Jones to this point in the week. But anything whatsoever approach things like this in your time covering Texas Tech, Chris?
Boy, did that little interaction blew up. I mean, it's national news, which is maybe exactly what Jerry Jones wanted. Yeah, and those guys, I listen to their show some, and those guys are straight radio hosts. That's the flagship station. You and I both worked for, 104.3, 97.3, which is the flagship station for Texas Tech. And I don't think anybody ever told us, say this, don't say that on the deal. And then I've got a different role with the Texas Tech Sports Network. And I've had some, I don't know, I've been placed in some very awkward situations and have had to, that's maybe one of the most fun in some ways, or the least favorite part of my job, is that when you do the football and the basketball thing like I do, you're talking to these people when they are as emotional as they possibly could be after a big win or after a devastating loss or whatever it may be.
Yeah. When at halftime and directly after the game, you're like first crack at it, guys. So you're really getting there when it's fresh.
Yeah, and it's okay. What am I asking? How am I phrasing it? I have limited time. And I've been criticized heavily before for not asking enough tough or forgetting a question, and I've got maybe 3 or 4 or 5 to get to, and then they get shuffled off somewhere else. And so I'm certainly not perfect. The one time, there's a few times that I can remember where I don't think anybody threatened to fire me. They just were frustrated. One time it was maybe phrasing on my part and I screwed up. I'll tell that in a minute. But the only time I've ever had, when Tommy Tuberville was here, I used to go interview him. This is the way he wanted it. I would go interview him on the field after the game was over. We would doing kind of a walk-off. And I would he hadn't talked to his team yet. There's people around. And Tech lost to Texas one time. And it didn't – and I'm trying to remember if that would have been 2010, 11 – it was one of those 2 years. Anyways, it was a tough end of the game loss. He was very frustrated, and he just kind of waved me off. I'm like, okay, back to you guys. I was like, Coach doesn't want to talk. And I mean, it's not my job to force him to do that. That was awkward. The only other time that I had, Tech had just lost to Kansas in basketball at home. And I said something, Chris Beard was the coach at the time, and I think I said something because here was always what was tricky about Mike and Chris specifically. I knew both of those guys well. I never could figure out if they were going to be what kind of mood they were going to be in. Because a lot of times I'd think they're in a good mood, I'll be playful, and this is when they're most frustrated or angry at something and all that. And I'm like, damn. And then other times when I think, ooh, they're going to be hot, they're going to be frustrated, and they would be as happy-go-lucky as you can imagine. So I never could – they were hard to peg. But I said something to Chris after the Kansas game and said, man, it's a tough loss against a pretty good team. And he just looked at me. He's like, well, damn, they're number one, this or that. And he's like, they're what do you mean pretty good? I'm just like, damn, I screwed up the wording. And I was like, we kind of ended it and whatever. And I felt bad and I wasn't trying to do it because it's emotional. And he texted me 30 minutes later and said, hey man, I'm sorry. I'm just, and I was like, dude, don't sweat it. I'm good. I should have worded it better. But those kinds of things suck. Now, the thing with Jerry Jones and those guys, they're pressing – You're the voice of the fan in some way because they're pressing, Mr. Jones on why the team just had their worst home loss since 1987 or something,
Right.
and trying to get answers. And I didn't think they handled themselves poorly, but you could tell he was bothered. And I guess the real question is, why is the owner doing a weekly show every week during a football season? I think he's the only one in the NFL that does this.
Right.
So that's the real question there. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have any similar experiences like with your? You've interviewed
no, not
coaches
really.
You've interviewed coaches like I have.
Well, I've not in such close proximity or where I had to follow it up the very next week or would see them the next day or anything like that. I remember during the Tuberville era, word getting to me that they were annoyed with my post-game coverage following a win against Oklahoma and then the curb stomping at the hands of Iowa State next week. I think I opened up the post-game coverage saying something along the lines of I could defecate it in a bag, light it on fire, leave it on your porch, and that would be a pretty good assessment of generally what we saw at Jones Stadium tonight, which I didn't feel like was that harsh. You got your ass kicked by Iowa State after you go on the road and beat number one. But I in general, and maybe I'm just too callous, but I'm like, anytime I ever heard anybody was irritated or anything along those lines, I just thought. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Say you're watching a game, you get hit with a hunch, an instinctual calling. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're going to place your bets to keep up with everything going down in real time as you submit that slip. And right now, FanDuel is going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with only a $5 bet out the gate at FanDuel.com. Anytime I ever heard anybody was irritated or anything along those lines, I just thought, get the fuck over it, man. You're getting paid millions to coach a game. And particularly in Lubbock, Texas, where the media scrutiny is not exactly white hot, you might suggest. I'm like, get over it, dog. Go on with your day. What are you worried about? Yada, yada, yada. I think being in positions where obviously you want to continue to maintain that relationship, which was not something I was ever concerned with whatsoever. I always felt like there was a strict fence or whatever between me and them. I've never been buddies with any of these guys. I hadn't really ever cared to be because it wasn't something that made a difference in my job or not. Again, I think it's a little bit different when you're in your shoes because you're having to maintain that conversation week after week after week after week. And you don't want somebody that would rather, punch you in the mouth as look at you to necessarily be in that type of relationship. But no, I don't. There's been some irritants over the years, but nothing that ever got too wild. I would love for any of them to have had the nuts to come on and actually say some of these things in a broadcast medium like I guess Jerry did, although I'm not trying to give him credit for doing that. This is how he sets it up. He wants to do this type of stuff.
Yes.
But I don't think all too often I've had a whole lot of sympathy for guys who, again, are so well compensated. And for the most part, talking about our media atmosphere in the 806, who are for the most part, fawned over and not really criticized or anything. I mean, there's no comparison even to like Dallas. But you think about like New York sports media. I mean, it's just a totally different zoo, right? Than what we're talking about for the most part here. So I appreciate that question from our Matador mobster. And thanks for some of your insights, Chris. I know that it could tend to get spicy, especially if you're talking about a program here or there that has been underachieving in some of those years.
Well, and like, part of my role too is I host the football coaches show, which is an hour a week. And that's part of where that relationship comes from. And like, we're there's some weeks where I'm like, hey man, I don't want to be here any more than you do right now, having to, I've sat there and had to relive a 66-6 loss, an 82-27 loss. On and on. Like devastatingly so. And I'm always like, how am I going to get through this and make this entertaining? How can I try to go over this and be responsible radio host, make it entertaining where people, and also just not get the guy to want to punch me in the throat. it is very slippery and tricky, and there's an art to it, I guess. But I've got a lot of practice, of trying to. Because sometimes when people are sitting there at halftime and it's like 28-0, and you're like, "Well, today sucks. I'm gonna leave the game early and I'm gonna go home and drink beer." I'm already thinking about the next Thursday night. Like, damn,
yeah,
this is I'm gonna have to relive this damn thing again. Brutal, and then you get everybody mad, and it's just So that's just part of it. I signed up for it, but
I mean, you always want to be respectful, and I don't think you ever either want to take the insane fan approach of like just going overboard with, man, you guys suck. This sucks. Why'd you not do this? Why'd you not do that? I mean, that would be insane to do that in our roles. But I also think at the same time, my loyalty has always been to the fan, and I am. That's because I am a fan. It's not like I'm something separate from that. I'm just a fan, and so I think obviously the fan base always knows when somebody's putting on airs or trying to keep some veil of like something that's not in touch with reality. So I was always more prone to not wanting to disturb or insult that relationship, because it's the fans that are out there listening every day in radio or watching on TV or on YouTube or whatever it might be. So I was always a heck of a lot more serious about maintaining that credibility as opposed to the other side of it. But my man C Level is walking the high wire of looking to maintain both, which is not all that easy.
And I've always said, man, when either one of the teams that I mess with, when they play bad, you say it. I mean, it's just like it's not like it's not going well. It's not. I just never get personal with it, and that's where I think that's where some kind of cross the line is when they start like getting real personal and like real like just angry and they're somewhat uninformed, whatever.
All right, I shouldn't have said what I said about the flaming bag of doo-doo. That's my
no, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Yes, but good,
right,
great question though. Yeah, Cal and I definitely have some experiences there for sure.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that question from Matador Mob Insider. Before we get out of here, Chris, let's spend just a minute in the land of the round ball, because we've seen some things rolling out now as far as some Big 12 odds and ends for Texas Tech. We got a preseason top 25 poll release that Texas Tech was not a part of. Saw some Ken Palm ratings that Texas Tech was, I think, number 15 or number 16 in the nation. I went on a little bit, I don't know, of a run last night or 2 nights ago on Twitter saying we've got to abolish the AP poll in all sports. Am I serious? Oh, yeah, I am serious. Let's put these pencil pushers out the pasture, I think is what I said exactly. But I really am basing that in a little bit of what recently has been going on with not only the Tech basketball program, but the Texas Tech football program. How come they don't want me, man? I feel like Will Smith, and the AP poll is my daddy. He just keeps running off on these obscure trucking jobs. What did you make of not only some of the odds, which I want to get to as well, but the fact that Texas Tech, Grant McCasland, and the Red Raiders not getting a mention in a preseason top 25 poll?
I used to love watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, man. And after he did that to Chris Rock, I'm like, man, I wouldn't piss on him if he was on fire. Yeah, sorry. I bet we can't get away with saying that. You may have to edit that out, Cowan. The poll didn't bother me. I thought you would sneak into the back end of the top 25. I think most basketball people really pay attention to the Ken Palm rating or ranking. I think that's what other coaches do. That's what media folks do. That's what, it's an offensive and defensive rating, excuse me. And it factors in a lot of stuff. And I think it had, what did it have, Tech, like 17th or 15th or something like that?
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Yeah. And I want to say that you had 7 teams in the top 17 or something along those lines, or top 15, whatever it was in the Ken Palm ratings. I think we had it pegged. You'd have 5 in the top 10, and it's Tech and Cincinnati, or Cincinnati and Tech, and then I think you've got like the BYUs and the Kansas States just right there on the cusp of kind of what the pecking order would be. But as I mentioned the other day, man, I think 7th in the Big 12 is potentially like 15th best in the country kind of thing. I mean, you could be 7th in the Big 12 and be a a 3 or 4 seed in the tournament. Is how good and deep this league is. But from the AP poll standpoint, it set a record that had never happened before. And I would say this. How's this for a mouthful? I think that what this basketball conference could be this year is better than any year that the SEC has ever had in football. And what you must do is you've got to have postseason success, and then one of these teams is got to go win the whole thing. And I think if that's the case, then I think that you have a legitimately saying we're better in basketball in this league than the SEC is in football. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, we'll kind of see where that takes us. But I mean, you and I also saw some conference championship odds. And you have better odds than Cincinnati, even though you weren't ranked. You have better odds to win the conference championship, regular season, I think it was. So anyway, loaded. And I think I saw the preseason team. There was only one newcomer on the starting 5. Rare is it that you get the best players from last year all come back. I mean, that is unheard of, especially this day and age when everybody's switching around everywhere. But Jeremy Roach was like the newcomer of the year, and I think first team All Big 12, a Baylor addition from Duke. But yet Hunter Dickinson, I mean, there's a whole bunch of folks that were Taman Lipsey from Iowa State. There's a whole bunch of folks that were in this league that were the best players that are back again, which makes this league just, monstrous. I mean,
yeah. Just kind of hard to fathom right now what that's going to look like, and curious to see
bloodbath.
Bloodbath. Yeah, and like you said before, Lion's Den, Meat Necklace, and all those types of descriptors. And Hunter Dickinson, I'm seeing him at the top of the list with some of those Big 12 Conference player preseason accolades. I'm thinking, still,
yep,
move on with your life.
Money's good in Lawrence.
Man. Life goes on.
The money's good in Lawrence.
All right, Chris, appreciate the insights and the time as always, man. Enjoyed it, and we'll be back for another tomorrow. We'll see you then.
You and I will try not to get fired and ask anybody anything inappropriate between now and then. Yeah, but seriously though, Will Smith, yeah, right there. I mean, for your little escapades there on stage with my man Chris Rock. Anyway, we'll talk to everybody tomorrow. Appreciate the time. Keep hope alive.
Yeah, and I'll let you know if tonight during any subsequent conversation with the wife, she tells me I could get another guy to ask me these questions, because I feel like that's really the biggest danger zone I operate within right now. I don't know who the YouTube overlord is, but maybe there's one out there. All right, appreciate you guys for being out there. Thanks as always for the time. Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts, so you never miss an episode. You want to get into the Matador Mob? It's easy. Just get into the show notes, find the link there, and try on a free 14-day trial, your direct line to Chris and myself. Thanks to those who were chopping it up with us in there regularly, and thanks to those who were chopping it up in the YouTube comments section. One of the best ways to help us grow the show is to comment anything below. So appreciate you all for doing that. Thanks for being out there. For Chris, I'm Casey. We hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.